Gaia is Mother Earth. It's a reference to the sound where we both come from. We actually met through trance music, and yeah, it's the common ground. It's the music why we met each other, and you know, it's very important, I think, to never forget your roots, where you're coming from. Well, personally, I've always been a massive fan of you know, bands like The Orb, Klaus Schulze, Tomita, Tangerine Dream, Vangelis, Future Sound of London, and I really miss that music nowadays. You know, it seems like it's been something from the past, where I think it's so powerful. Trance music comes from these early synthesizer sounds. You know, Kraftwerk is very important. 808 State, yeah, a couple of those bands. And I grew up listening to that music, and I think I found something in Benno that we clicked on a musical level, because he was also really a big fan of that sound.
And it's just funny to see how trance has been evolving over the past 20 years. I mean, when we started, it was totally different compared to now, and there was a story before that as well. And it was just interesting to see if we could combine all those sounds that we already did, that we're doing right now, but you know, to do something where we grew up with.
The Moons of Jupiter for me is a monument for the artists that I admire the most, particularly Kraftwerk, The Orb, Speedy J, Future Sound of London, Klaus Schulze, Jean-Michel Jarre, Vangelis, but also we're both pretty big techno heads. You know, Chris Liebing, Sven Vath, you know, we even go to techno festivals together. So I think we both have a techno heart with a melodic background. And we just felt that there's a void right now for that kind of music. It's something that we love, but you don't hear it a lot anymore. There's the odd album that really strikes me. I mean, recently I've really been loving Carbon-Based Lifeforms and Bicep and that kind of sound, but there's never really been an homage to the early 90s, when the sound we now call trance was born. You know, Jam and Spoon, Oliver Leap, yeah, you name it. Those guys spring to mind, and for me, Moons of Jupiter is the next step in the Gaia project. I mean, Gaia comes from trance, but I think I want to show my diversity as a musician. And I think it's almost, I mean, the Gaia stuff for me fuels all the other Armin van Buuren stuff that we're producing.
But the funny thing for me is that as much as we like the techno beats as well, I've never managed to make a proper techno record, or whatever you would call it, just to have the beats like that and to have a simple melody. Up till now it didn't really fit. So from my perspective, it took like 20 years to get to this point that we finally can combine those things as well.
I think the Gaia project is quite bold, to be honest, because we don't want to answer to anybody. We don't do collaborations. We don't have no vocal tracks or featured vocal singers. We don't want to do remixes as Gaia, at least for now. In fact, we completely destroyed the concept of making an album. We did it in exactly the opposite way. So normally you would go into the studio, you would write an album, and then you would mix it and master it, and then you would decide which singles you're going to promote, and then you would go on tour. With Gaia, we did it completely the other way around. We went on tour before we finished the album.
Actually, there was no album at all.
There was no album.
We could not even, our production team, we could not even give them a proper listen as to what they could expect.
There was no music, there was just loops.
Yeah, we had to write it down, and the first time that we did it was in Paradiso. And that was pretty much fun, because then for the first time we heard what we did. we even didn't know what it was going to be. And then afterwards we had the time to make it a proper album.
So based on the reaction of that first show that we did in Paradiso, we made the album, because we felt the music, and there was some sort of a natural sequence of the loops that we created. So what we did was 100% live. There was no arranged music like you would do as a DJ. So it was very exciting. It's probably one of the most exciting things I've done in my career, because it was very, very scary, but very pure.
To say the least, yeah. Yeah, well, we started, the first thing that we really wanted to do is create loops, just like that. And then we thought, let's do it, make it as simple as possible, put it in hardware, and just pick the essence of it. Just a couple of loops, a couple of synth layers. And that's what we did. And then we could control those, say, okay, we want to filter them. We want to have the beats away, and we want to have more melody. We want to have more verb. We want to ride. We want to clap right now. And that was the exciting part.
Benno bought joysticks from a Chinese manufacturer, and like a computer game joystick, and you remove the inside, the spring from the inside, so you had A, B, C, and D, which you can manipulate.
Yeah, in that sense, it was. I always had a dream, because I did some live things in the past, but it always felt a little bit, you were stuck in just what you were having. And what I would find really interesting is have a knob that does two things at once. So you can do two things at once, not just one knob, but two. And then when we made this device and we first tried it, we felt, hey, this is really going to work. And then our creativity, the creativity that we have in our mind, it could come out.
So we completely started from scratch, also with the setup, because we wanted to limit ourselves to not overuse the CPU load of the laptops that we use, because obviously the laptops trigger the MIDI files. So we decided to use only one soft synth. So all the sounds you hear on the Moons of Jupiter are created by one soft synth. Because if you have like more than 100 plugins in a project, the project will be very slow and it will drain the CPU. And especially if you're standing in a club or in a festival, the laptops get warm really fast. So we wanted to have the CPU load very low. And that's when Benno came up with the idea, why don't we limit ourselves rather than buying every plugin on the planet? And I think that was really powerful, because we had to only use one soft synth. I mean, 6 instances of, but it's one soft synth. It's the Native Instruments Massive.
I think the main, the thing that's the most hard is to see what clip is actually doing what kind of layer is behind it, how are we gonna bring this to the audience and bring it to ourselves. And then we have the play that we are playing. I mean, he is doing things that I don't know. We didn't study anything. We didn't prepare. Obviously, we know what we're doing.
We don't have a backup.
We don't have a backup, and we kind of know what we want. I mean, I can see that when he's doing certain things on a certain knob, I know, okay, in like 8 beats, he's coming back with the kick. And then I know, okay, then if he's going to do that, then I'm going to give it a little bit more space, give it a little bit more filter open, more melodies.
And if we feel the crowd's really digging a certain vibe in a track, we can extend it and play with the crowd.
Yeah.
And that's so much more exciting, creating music on the spot, live for the audience. And yeah, I really want to stress that this is such an inspiration also for all the other projects that we're doing. I mean, but Gaia is the opposite of what you would do as Armin van Buuren, I think. But it's still also me, you know, because we produce it together and there's a lot of my DNA into it. It really, when I listen to Moons of Jupiter, it really brings me back to when I started as a producer. And it felt such a relief when we were in the studio creating the live set, not to be limited by an arrangement, or we were just creating loops. And loops sounds very, I mean, when you hear the word loop, you think of a 4 kicks or 16 claps, but a loop can also be a very long sequence of strings or a big melody that is evolving, you know. But by having loops, I mean, already the big classical composers like Ravel and Mozart already knew that the power of repetition, and that this is what we want to express and experiment with Gaia. It's a melodic album. But it's a journey. Gaia is Mother Earth, and we're taking you to the moons of Jupiter. It's another planet in the Milky Way of Armin van Buuren.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that it's natural for us to do it this way is because we know each other for so long. I mean, I think well,
we've been making music since 2006 together.
Yeah, so that's we go a long way back. And during the time when you're in the studio, you know each other at a certain point that you know, okay, he's going to say, I want you to have this, and then I'm over, yeah, but I cannot move faster. I mean, this is what it is. So we know each other that well. And then it's just a matter of performing it live. That's the really fun part, because if it works, it's like, yeah, I knew you were going to do this, and I could anticipate him on that one. And he has the same thing with me.
Maybe, yeah. I've always been a big fan of space. You know, I was a nerd growing up, watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 2001: Space Odyssey, Star Wars. I've always been a massive fan of space, and I think trance music in space for me has always been, you know, it's been a big role. You know, it's been a big role in my life, and I've always dreamed of doing a concept. I had the idea for doing a Moons of Jupiter kind of project for a long time, and then I discovered that Jupiter has 67 satellites, and I thought, that's amazing. Why not make a journey that stops at some of these satellites?
The fun part is also that these all have different diameters, different. Some are rough, some are round, and that's so we were more free to actually experiment sound-wise as well. We could say, this is a real rough moon, so there you go, and we could do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. For me, if you listen to Moons of Jupiter, it is really like Gaia takes you on a trip to Jupiter, and you fly in a spaceship to the moons. You know that, and this is what you would hear. It's a soundtrack for that journey.
I think it's almost essential just to listen to the album from the very start to the very end to get to that concept, because the tracks on itself, we like them as well, of course, but it's the journey that makes it so interesting.
Specifically for this, and it's more than a mixed album. I want to stress how we made this. We first did the live show, then we did the sequence, because we knew that needs to be an album, because people, you know, they want to have a reference for some sort. But when you go to see a live show of Gaia, we may take a different route next to the moons, depending on the crowd's reaction. So it's not a fixed, this sequence is not a fixed thing for us. You can fly and passing different moons all the time, and that's what makes it very interesting. So having the separate tracks doesn't really do the album justice. It's even more than a mix CD. It's not like we had individual tracks and made a mix album. All the sounds that you hear are sort of intertwined. So I strongly recommend everybody to listen to the entire sequence rather than the individual tracks, which is difficult now with, you know, Spotify and everything, because everybody's used to like checking individual tracks. But if you can, please listen to Moons of Jupiter and see it as a journey.
This is also something that, speaking for myself, I love to do for so long, because normally you make a track and it's just a track for a certain setting and then that's it. But it's just so interesting if you take the concept and you can fill it in from the very start to the very end, do different tempos, do different sounds, different stories if you like. Then it makes it more interesting for us as artists to express what we think is, well, I could not even call it trance or techno or ambient. I don't know what it is. It's all of that, actually. Yeah. That makes it so interesting.
I felt an enormous amount of freedom creating Moons of Jupiter because we didn't want to make trance, we didn't want to make non-trance, we didn't want to make techno, we didn't try to stay away from techno, we didn't want to make down-tempo, nor did we want to stay away from down-tempo. We didn't want to limit ourselves, we just wanted to go into the studio without any prejudice and create music that we felt came from us, like without any expectations, certain tempo, nothing. The only agreement that we had was the limitation in sense of the 6 synthesizers, the 2 live synthesizers, and the sequencer. Trance is a very important part of both our lives. I mean, Benno started his career as rank 1. He's had a massive amount of success with a couple of the tracks that he's done, and he's worked with a lot of different people as well. We're not exclusively working with each other, but we just have, I don't know, a click in the studio, common ground. We don't need 2 words. We think the same usually when we hear a track. Having said that, though, we really complement each other because I don't know. It just feels like when he's thinking this, I'm thinking that. And sometimes I'm stuck with a track and he continues it, and then like, oh, and then it's just like he's the second part of my brain sometimes.
But actually, some of those tracks are actually certain parts that he did while being on the road, and that I did somewhere else. And then we came together, and some of those things, they didn't were interesting enough on its own, but then we combined with all that we done together, and then it worked out. It was really interesting to see how that worked.
Sometimes I just was working on Gaia stuff, and we had the agreement not to arrange anything. We were just making loops, and sometimes I just had a kick, or I just had a loop that I loved. That was the only thing that remained from 1 hour on my laptop, looking through different libraries or manipulating sounds or fiddling with Native Instruments Massive or tweaking the Arturia or Virus synths. And you just find a sound like, oh, this is an amazing. I played it to Ben and I was like, oh, I have an idea for it. And then I just feel like the whole Moons of Jupiter project didn't cost me energy in the sense of, when you're creating a track at home and you stare at your sequencer, there's always this moment like, oh, I have to arrange it. Oh, I have to build this snare fill. And I have news for you. I think this is the first electronic album that doesn't include a single snare fill or a crash or a reverb kick or a reverse noise. None. On the entire Moons of Jupiter album, there's not a single snare fill. That's quite bold.
Well, it's true though.
It's true.
Yeah, how would you describe that?
We started in Miami a couple of years ago with the concept of Gaia Live, and then we wear the hoodies because we feel, I don't know if you agree with this, Benno, but you have to help me. We agree it shouldn't be about the face or the happy smiling guy or the guy jumping in the air. It should be really about the music and the feeling that it evokes. So we started with that concept, and we just felt like we have to move on with this. That's why we came with the completely live setup. And to also, I think first and foremost, we did this for ourselves rather than for a crowd. Of course, we hope that people will like the album, but we did it for us.
We enjoy it that much that when we were doing this and we were building this setup, you have to imagine that we were actually kids in a candy store.
Kids in the candy store.
We were doing things. Wow, we can do this.
Whoa.
We should record it.
And normally we have all these sounds. Like sometimes we're creating a pop track, for example, in the studio, and then you're putting a loop, and then he puts a reverb on it. It's like, whoa, and then we're just grooving, and then, oh no, we can't do that groove because we're working on the pop track, so it won't work on the radio, so forget it. But now we were like, one day we're gonna do an album that we are gonna do exactly what we wanna do, and there's nobody that's gonna tell us what to do. So nobody here at Armada, not our wives, not our best friends. The only person I had to answer to for this album is Benno.
And vice versa.
So that's it. There was no compromise. This is who we are. And if you don't like it, tough luck.
Yeah, we thought it would be interesting because it was really hard to tell the guys, oh, we're going to do this track and it sounds like this. So, okay, well, what we're going to do then? So then we came up with the idea, since we have MIDI loops, since we have MIDI triggers, why not use them? I mean, if you go to a big stage, a lot of the things are actually triggered by MIDI. So we thought, okay, just send out the things that we have, see if they can do something with it. And at first it was one big bulk of MIDI data. But then we decided, okay, we're going to use this and that's actually what triggers the visuals, what triggers the lighting. So, well, we're sound guys and visual guys right now, in a way.
I also noticed that the team, my team that I normally tour with when I do my big shows, they're also involved in the Gaia project. And I just felt a whole new energy with my team when we started doing the Gaia project. Because honestly, it felt like I was going to a new university or to a first date, or because everything I knew before was gone. We just started from scratch, and my team got so excited that they actually wrote software to use the MIDI triggers that we send out, and we didn't even know it was possible. So Benno was in his studio most of the time, not even making music. He was soldering. He was soldering equipment together.
Yeah, it's another hobby. I mean, you have to have hobbies. I mean, we make music; it's our hobby, but it's also what we do all out. But
part of the setup that we have is custom made for Gaia. So that's equipment that no one has.
But this is also because if we're in the studio most of the times, we feel limited in a way. We have dozens of controllers, we have dozens of hardware things. But we felt it would be nice to have just certain things that we can touch on, and that actually does what we feel is very important to bring a track, and that's those joysticks. But it's also, for example, we have a device, and then you can say, okay, I want the kicks there. You can mute them, you can add them, and it's just a touch of a button. And normally you would have to go to the mouse, click to a certain clip or whatever, and add those bass drums to get the sound. Now we have it on our fingertips.
So we add, for example, if you see us, we program the drums live. So for example, there may be a kick, but then the closed hat or the claps or whatever, we trigger them, we put them live in the sequencer on the spot. So, and we can't save that. Every show we do, we need to do it again, and then we won't do it the same. So you're sure that every Gaia show you're coming to, Moons of Jupiter show, will be different. It has to be, because we didn't record or pre-program anything. It's just the loops that we have.
Well, one side of the story is that we felt for this project, it's all about the music. It's not so much about the faces and who we are. It's about what we want to express, the music. So we thought it would be cool to have a sort of that kind of thing that hides our faces. And but also it reminds me a bit of like Star Wars kind of atmosphere, you know. It's yeah.
Well, you know, you know how they say that the dance floor is the new church in a way. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think it's a little provocative to stand on stage with those hoodies on. Trust me, it's not easy because it's very warm in those, and they're leather. Especially him, he's very sweaty, so
it's worth it though.
Also, I want to say that, you know, in 2010, I had a little bit of a backlash when I was #1 voted by DJ Mag, because I felt restricted very much in the studio, because I was trying to please my fans too much, and I was not being myself anymore. So all I wanted to do is make a follow-up to the single that I had before that had a little bit of success. So I forgot that I was just supposed to be having fun in the studio. And that's what I'm doing right now. I think if you see Armin van Buuren in 2019, you see a guy that does trance, does pop things, does down-tempo stuff, but also does a radio show and and that's because I now accept more who I am as an artist. This is who I want to be, and this is what I want to represent. And I know that for some of the people who have certain expectations about Gaia, it may be a little bit of something they have to get used to. But this is probably the most personal album I've ever done. Probably the album I'm most proud of because it's one story. It feels like it's whole for me. And it is really like you look into my soul. Like if people don't like this album and they say something bad about it, they will crush me. Now it's true because it's so personal. It is so, it comes from the heart. And when I listen to it today, I don't get bored of it. I can listen to it over and over and over and over again, and every time still be surprised about, you know, the tracks, or just love listening to it.
I think it's also because it's somehow in our DNA. I mean, yeah. I think the people that really love the things that we let them listen to, they understand what we mean. They understand it as well. And that's just it's just so powerful to see that those sounds, it's either in your heart or it's not. I don't know if I may say this, but of course I hope that a lot of people will love this, because I personally feel, I mean, as Rank One, I did a lot of trance thing in the past, and but still this touches that same essence for me. I mean, I like to go to techno festivals, and I like Chris Liebing, for example. I love those beats and I love those type of sound. And it was just so interesting to see if we could just touch it a little bit. I mean, it's not that, but because it's way too melodic, I guess. But those melodies, I think that's the big part. Those melodies, they touch our souls. Exactly. I mean, they're very simple.
Very simple.
Very simple. But it's the way they evolve. Well, it brings us in a sort of a trance, basically. And yeah, well, that's the main reason for doing this. Yeah, well, the one of the things that we really wanted to do is, in this story that we're telling, to start really minimal, to start basically with nothing. I mean, you're in space. There's not so much in space. I mean, there's just void. And then the further you go, the more you can see, and the more will come to you. So, and this is what we wanted to get the audience triggered by this as well. And it is gradual, but for us it's essential, I think. I mean, if I listen to it again and over again, we had to check those masters, and every time we had to go over this album again, and it didn't bore us. And that was, how many times did we listen to it?
Unbelievable.
But it's the journey from minimal to the very end is, well, not so minimal anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's also a reaction to these times, you know, where everything goes fast and everything's Spotify and everything's, you know, quick and playlists and everything. It's an anti-reaction. We want to take people to a different place of the universe and show them how beautiful it is. Come with us to the moons of Jupiter and we'll show you how beautiful it can be if you open your mind to it. And of course, I understand that the people that listen to the older Gaia tracks will be somewhat surprised, hopefully in a positive way. It takes a little bit of an effort I think, to get adjusted to the new Gaia sound. Of course, you'll still hear the older Gaia sound in there because we're both trance fans by heart, but we don't want to be stuck in the trance thing. We want to be moving on and tell people, hey, there's more planets in this universe, you know? Not saying that the current trance sound is bad at all. We're not, you know, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying, like, if you open your mind to this journey, and you come with us to the moons of Jupiter, to this dark world where it's minimalistic, where it's exciting, where it's beautiful. You know, if you let us take you, I'm sure that you'll be amazed.
I think we made a big picture of all of these things. I mean, you could see it like if you're watching a very big painting. At first, you're zooming into one. You can zoom into one person, which can be interesting. But it's more interesting to see what's happening for the rest of the painting, yeah. And that's actually what we felt is missing these days, at least for us. And this is, how many times did we not tell each other, like, why are we not going to do this?
Exactly,
and every time there was a reason not to, and at a certain point we said, well, we have to do this before we die. I mean, this is something we really need to be done.
The biggest compliment that I got was from you when I remember, because normally Benno and I sit in the studio together all the time, almost every day, and we still do. But for this particular album, when we were arranging it, we worked remotely. So I had the loops and it had to be arranged. So I was arranging and he was arranging and we were sending each other back and forth. And then during one of those conversations, because I was on tour and I did the arranging mostly on my hotel room, and he was in his studio and he was fixing, and then I got the project back and I sent it to him, and it was 50-50 thing. And at one point he was so into it that he told me, he said, I have to release this album before I die. And it sounded pretty dramatic, but I had exactly the same feeling. I was like, this is so personal. I want to, no matter what this album will do as a success, or whether we will be successful or not, or whether we will upset the whole trans family or not, I don't know. This is who we are. If you don't like it, at least we are happy.
But that proves to us, I think, that it's a genuine thing, right? I mean, and that's, I think, really important these days as well. I mean, as an artist, you can do projects and tracks, but doing something this personal, and we like it this much, it needs to be done.
It needs to be, we need to share this with you. And I'm really happy that I'm in a position that I can, of course, release this, and Benno put his trust in me, but also as a human being, music is so important to me personally. And when I listen to Carbon-Based Lifeforms, for example, I'm a massive fan of those guys. Big props to you. That was a big inspiration for the album, as was The Orb, as was Future Sound of London. I always dreamed of making an album that had that power to me, and that's what we've done. So we've created something that we always wanted to make. That's a lot, to put a long story short. And the good news is, Jupiter has 67 satellites, and we've only taken you on this album to 21. So who knows?
Well, one of the things that we really needed to do is to have a big rehearsal somewhere. We couldn't take the risk, just to be on stage somewhere and that our production guys don't know what they could expect. I mean, we had to connect our stuff. So that's why we rented a venue, and there we could just try out things, see if it works, because we had an idea, okay, this must work, but it must work on stage as well, and that's why
because we're not the only artists. I mean, of course, we're the two guys on stage, but the visual artists that are in front of house are equally adding to the show, because they interact with us and they get the MIDI triggers, and so the show is not only based around us or the equipment that we use and the stuff we create live, but the sound guy and the visual artist, the light guy, they're extremely important. They're just as much, they could be on stage with us, but of course they have to be in the back because they have to see what they're doing. So it's a special stage setup that we hope to bring all around the world. When we decided to do the Moons of Jupiter project, actually I was also motivated, of course, by Benno's enthusiasm and excitement, and he had some ideas about the equipment that he wanted to create and wanted to use. So we started testing with this equipment already in his house, in his studio. And I said, well, learning from our Armin Only shows, I know you can never do an important show like that without having a proper rehearsal. So we booked a big concert venue in my home city of Leiden, and we were there for a couple of days just to do the actual show. We recorded those sets, and those sets are not identical. They're completely different. So one set was an hour and a half, a second set was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And then it was really motivational also for my crew, because the visual guys, they get different triggers. But they were so happy because now they could look into our session and see what we were actually doing and interact with that. So what you see happening is an integral part. So that made a lot of sense for us to do it this way. We're doing something new. We're doing not something that someone else has done before, and that just feels exciting.
Yeah, but that was the most exciting part was the very first time that we pressed play. I mean, you have to imagine that we only had loops, right? We only had some equipment that we just soldered, and we connected it, and the very first time that we even tried to make something, we were like, oh man, this is hard work.
Yeah,
is this ever going to happen? And this was just 4 days before this big rehearsal. So we were like, oh no. But then we felt like the pressure of doing it and being on the spot, then you get into the zone. I mean, if you just if the setup would be here and just turning the knobs isn't gonna work, you have to be in that zone, and that's what's the real fun part, and that's why we also did this rehearsal to be. You know, we invited friends to see, to have the experience.
Yeah,
and
we did
it worked.
Yeah, we did a show just for our friends and the management and a couple of people that we knew. I think 30 people, even my parents. And we did it at like a full volume in Leiden, my home city.
Which was pretty scary for 30 people.
Very scary, but then we were done, and then it was kind of a round of applause, and then we looked at each other. Did you like it? And then our manager said, yeah, we liked it, but what is it? What is it? What is it? They tried to wrap their heads around it, and we looked at each other like, what do you mean, what is it? It's Gaia.
The thing is, and I want to stress this out, I mean, what we actually did there was doing the album, and an album is something different than you might do on stage. This is why we did the album, because most of the times when you are on a stage, you're limited. I mean, there's a DJ might be playing before you, and then it doesn't make sense to go from ambient to hard techno, for example. But then we felt the opportunity to do it, and this is something that for me was really, how do you say it? It was something that I really wanted to do, and it was so fulfilling.
It's producing live on stage.
Yeah.
Like for example, if you have a groove going, we have some amazing kick drums and bass lines and loops and whatever not. And sometimes if you feel that the crowd is really digging that groove, you don't really want to change the groove, but maybe you want a different melody on top, because otherwise it gets boring. So the idea behind Gaia is also to manipulate what we're doing based on what we feel that the crowd is responding to. So we may have a loop that we really like, and we just keep that loop running and go into the next track. We may up the tempo, and we may go down with the tempo. Everything that you think of is possible. We just made a setup, which for some people may be very difficult to understand, but for us it's a very logical setup.
But the fun part for me as well is that we can bypass each other.
Yeah.
So for example, I would have a knob that filters all things out that he wants to put in, and vice versa. Yeah. And this we actually had some unexpected things that really worked because of that, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a little garden of experimentation, and I think the only way that you can keep music exciting for yourself is if you stay that little kid in the studio. And right now there's so much possible, with modern day equipment and with the DAWs and I think it's just a matter of limiting yourself rather than expanding. So we consciously chose our favorite DAW, our favorite soft synth, and our favorite analog synths and equipment. Ben always said to me when we were producing in the studio, I want to have one knob right here next to my coffee cup where I can control the filter and the reverb. Why doesn't it exist? He said that, I think, maybe 100 times. So I always told him, build it. And at one point he was like, you know what? I am gonna build it. So he created equipment that didn't exist and that we're using right now for the Gaia show. And it makes total sense. I mean, probably some manufacturer watching will probably try to copy it, but it doesn't matter. As long as we can use it on stage and manipulate what we're feeling. And it's so great to have that possibility to really steer the journey, because you come in our spaceship and we're taking the journey. We're passing Io, we're passing Europa, we're passing Temisto. We're going on the journey. Just join us and just let us take the wheel, and we'll steer you to the right direction.
It's also, I think, 20 years of studio experience that we put into this project.
No man, it's two little kids with a garden of toys.
That's what we all want, right?
Exactly. Well, Benno doesn't want to tour that much. Otherwise, he would have been a DJ.
True that.
Which is fine. We both have kids, and he just decided to be more at home, which I can totally understand. But for Gaia show, we need to be on the road together. So we're going to do a limited amount of shows. We don't do 100 shows a year. We can't. It's also a very different way of touring, because when I tour as Armin van Buuren, I have my crew, I have my stage set up, the CDJs and whatnot. there's not a CDJ in sight when I do the Gaia show. Everything is loop based, and everything that we do is live. So we have keyboards on stage, we have live equipment, we have everything to make a live show, but it's not a DJ setup. So we have to bring all this equipment with us around the world, which is very costly because it's pretty big equipment. The boxes are pretty big. But
having said that, I mean, I cannot wait to perform those tracks again on stage, because the fun part is, for me at least, to see how will it be if we do it the next time and the next time, because every time it will be different in a way.
And we have the freedom now to go to other moons that are not on the album as well. So we will keep generating loops, and if there's a day that we're in the studio trying to create a new Armin van Buuren track, then we might just say, not this day, we're going to make some loops. And then we'll just go in nerd mode and create a couple of new loops. So it may be that if you come to a Gaia show, you'll hear a completely new track. But please remember that that track is being arranged for you on the spot. It's not something that we've prepared beforehand.
Well, one of the things that makes it interesting, this project for me as well, is that finally I can put my technical, nerdish me into this project as well. I felt that we needed some more control than was possible, and you can buy almost any controller, but there wasn't just not the controller that we wanted to do with 20 years of experience studio time. So we thought, let's build it. And I have a background of, I'm a amateur electronics guy. I mean, it's just so much fun to see what you can buy these days. Just little things of 30 euros, and they're computers. And actually is a bit scary, because we go on stage for thousands of people
with self-built equipment.
It could be stuck. I don't know. I mean, we wrote some software for it, and perhaps it doesn't work, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. But we took the risk, and it pays off, because now we finally can have our ideas that are in our heads for so long.
Yeah, sure.
We can put it out. No warranty.
Well, thank you for buying this controller.
What's the warranty of life? I mean, you don't get any warranty at all.
Hey guys, I'm Armin van Buuren.
Hi, I'm Benno de Goeij.
Let us take you on a journey to the moons of Jupiter as Gaia.
This is something that we wanted to create for a very long time.
Our most personal album yet.